Welcome to the episode 41 of Screw Being Unhappy podcast. I am Zuzana Mukumai, and today I am talking to Blessing Allen Adebayo. Blessing is an international development leader, a global advisor on market systems development with a Czech NGO, and a climate resilience advocate. Blessing is pursuing her PhD in public health microbiology, supports women with polycystic ovary syndrome, and is married to her lifetime crush, Alan Adebayo. Currently living in the UK with their most beautiful twin girls on the planet. Hi, Blessing. I am so
Hi,
excited to have
Susan.
you here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I love the way you pronounce my name, by the way.
Well, hopefully, I'm pronouncing it in the best possible way.
Yes, you are. You are. You're looking beautiful today. How are you today?
Thank you, thank you. Everything is good. And as we say, the winter came to Zambia, so I am all dressed up. For you guys who are listening to the audio, I have big scarf and sweater. Meanwhile, Blessing is in her summer dress. I guess that's what we have to deal with when we live on the southern hemisphere. Blessing,
Yes.
I'm really excited to talk how you personally manage to balance all the things in your life that are important to you. And that's what we are going to be talking about today. Because every time I see your post on LinkedIn, I feel like, oh, she's doing yet another thing. So you are a researcher, you're expert in the international development, you do your part for the environment. You have twins, you are a wife, and you also have a book published. Uh, you do so many things, so it's a lot. And before we dive into how you manage everything, can you tell us a bit more about your story?
Well, thank you for asking. Like you said, I do a lot of things, and sometimes when I look at myself, I feel like I'm looking at someone outside of me, at someone outside of me. So a bit about my story. Um, I love the environment. So I grew up loving the environment, loving biology, plants, animals, especially the ocean and rivers. And I always thought that I would spend the rest of my life exploring that. But somehow, growing up in Nigeria, Africa, many of the livelihood is connected to agriculture. And so having that interlinkage between agriculture, livelihood, and the environment, I believe in pursuing most of my passion. So I'm someone who executes everything that comes into her heart. If something comes into my heart and I love to do it, I would just go for it. So I love the environment, and my studies were around the environment. And then I saw opportunities to improve livelihoods with my work, starting in Nigeria, and then getting opportunities around the world. And so, of course, I took it and I started to do it. And I just found myself in a place where I'm studying about the environment, walking around the environment, and then pursuing my passions for improving the lives of people who live in development countries like I grew up in, and then supporting agricultural projects, and then having a family because I fall in love, got married, and have kids. And so just doing these things and taking it one day at a time, doing what I love, making friends, building the environment, and doing the work that I love at the same time. Integrating all this and still finding a way to stay alive.
Yeah. And just to be upfront, and maybe for the people who are listening to fill in the gaps, that's the international development. This is how me and Blessing know each other, because we have the honor to work for same Czech NGO. Me, it's very few hours a week, but Blessing is there. That's how we met each other online and in person in the Czech Republic. And I remember when we talked before this podcast, and you mentioned when your twins were born, you found yourself crying in the bathroom of your offices, wondering, like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to manage all this? So, at which point did you realize that you have to find a way of having time and energy for really the important things in your life, for you, for your children, for your husband?
So one of the things that happens to you as a woman is you're a woman, you're a girl, and then you get married and you have children, and you're the same person. You're probably not ready for the way that your mind, your priorities, and your life would change. So before I had kids, or before I even got married, I already started working in international development. And work requires a lot of travel and a lot of time away from home. So that same person who loves to travel, loves to be a high performer at work, loves to do the things that I want to succeed at and be the best at everything that I want to do. I had kids. And I had 4 months of maternity leave, and I had to travel back to work. And showing up at work, and my children were at home, and missing them, I wasn't ready for the kind of emotions that come with missing being there for my children, because I wanted to excel at everything that I did. I wanted to be there for my children, and I still also wanted to excel at my work. So I enjoyed the achievements that I would make at work, and I wanted to excel at it. So I found myself with this kind of emotions where I felt like I wasn't doing well at any of it. I was here at work, resuming back from maternity leave. I felt like I had lost a lot of time at work, and I wasn't doing well. I wasn't present enough. And then I felt like I had just left my kids at home, and I wasn't doing well at that. And also being a wife, I felt like I was failing at multiple things at the same time, and the emotions just came pouring out, and I'll just go into the bathroom and just cry because it was important to me to succeed at all these things at the same time. And I just had that feeling like, blessing, you're not doing this right. And yeah, so moving from that, I think slowly I began to ask for help. I began to ask for help and just say, I let my line manager at the time know that this is the way I was feeling about work. I let my husband and my mom and the support system I had in my life, like, this is the way I was feeling about not being there for the kids. I started to identify those emotions, put my finger on them, and then take one item at a time and do well at it. So for my kids, this is what I could do at this point, because I'm a working mom and I can only be present at this time and do the best that I can for them while I'm there. And then I do have to go to work. And this is how much I can do at work. I probably could not do as much as I used to do when just in that season. This is how much I could do at work. And I started to give myself credit for things that I could do in that season of my life and go through the process. And I began to nurture the thoughts of how I could integrate all these parts and still feel like I was succeeding and being the best for myself. I knew I couldn't just dive into all of these things because I had taken on a bit more. So my body was still recovering from having twins. I was still learning to be a mom, learning parenting, and I was still learning to get back into the team and still be a high flyer like I used to before I had the kids, and just knowing that I could only do the best that I could do at this season and embrace this moment, embrace the moment, enjoy it. Why I had that moment, yes. And tell myself that I was doing well.
And I can imagine you referred to yourself as a high achiever, and that's something I resonate as well with. That must have been really hard for somebody identifying with herself like as a high achiever, then suddenly letting go in all these areas of life and realizing, oh, I can't do 100% here, I can't do 100% here. How did you manage that, and what helped you to overcome it?
Well, a lot of crying at first. A lot of crying at first. I remember that I would call my mom and I would just be crying on the phone. I would I started by, it was a lot for me because I was raised by a teacher. So my mom my mom is a teacher, and excelling was a big part of my growing up. And it was also important to me, most part of my, if I failed at something, I would personalize it. So the first thing I needed to do was know that to define what achievement was. I began to redefine what my definition of achievement was. Because yes, it was important to excel at work, but it was also important to excel as a whole person. And that whole person was also a mother and a wife and a friend. And I wasn't just one thing, I was several things. And there were several places to win. And one or two shouldn't suffer for another. So I began to first relax into it, accept that this is where I was, redefine the what's being a high achievement. And I decided to drop every standard that I have assumed was the definition of a high achiever, because I asked myself, where did I get the standards from? I got them from other people. I got them from the definition of what other people called a high achiever was. So for me, I asked myself, for you, Blessing, what would you define as achievement for yourself? You know, what would you define? And it would be, I defined it as me knowing in my heart that I have put in the best that I can put in at this time and at this season of my life. What would that mean to me? And how would that look? Yes, it would look like I wouldn't be able to succeed at several things, but where I couldn't succeed, I could succeed at asking for help and being the best version of myself at that. And that was just enough for me.
And I'm really happy that you are mentioning this, defining what success achievement means to you, because often, as you said, we have a definition that is actually not ours. It's of maybe the society, of our parents. And I love having my own success criteria. It's an exercise I have done for myself and my clients some time back. And just like defining what does it mean to be successful, what does it mean to have a successful day, it's so helpful, like defining it on our own terms. And the second thing I wanted to mention from what you were saying about this redefining of the roles, and I have actually a client who comes to my mind, right, is like, she is very successful. She had multiple careers, but suddenly she's a mom and wife, and like that needs adjustments. And I think all of us who have children, we realize that, oh, suddenly it's not the same as before, and it will never be same and again in our lives. And like we really need to go through this process of maybe also grieving the things we lost and finding our new balance, I would say.
Yes. And I think that's where speaking about it and embracing the support you can get from the people in your life. So before I had kids, I used to be slightly independent. Like I say to several people, if you don't know how to ask for help, go and get twins. Once you have twins, you will ask for help. You will ask for help. You will speak about it. So I was happy that I was able to speak about it and share with my support system, you know, my family and my friends and the people that I work with. And then slowly from, like you said, identifying what works for me. What do I want? What is my new vision of success?
Okay.
You know, what is my new vision of success? And how can I steward and lead this at this time? Yes.
And like now you kind of give me a perfect segue into the next question, what I wanted to ask. And let's talk about the logistics of this, right? Like this is the kind of mind and thought process we have to go through. But how the heck we put everything we want to do into the time we have? Like, how did you manage it? Like, how did you manage to put the work, the babies, husband, environment into the 24 hours you have in a day?
So I analyzed my strength and determined what I could do. So at the time, one of the first things that I did was I deferred my PhD. So I just said, school couldn't fit into this right now, for now, just for 2 years. Let me put this aside and find out what can fit into this. And then I was living in Nigeria. It was normal to have supports, like people, nannies and people who support you with the family and home. So I got that. I got two.
Yeah, that's the
One
best part of
living.
living in Africa. I can't imagine my life without the house help and nanny, like, yeah, six
Yes.
times a week.
Yeah. So I got two, one that lives in permanently and one that comes in 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I got that kind of help. And then I began to see which part of the career, how I could transition my career in a way that would allow me participate in the life and the family that I wanted to, and be able to fit the PhD back in. So while I was doing that transition, I took a career break for like 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have like a full-time permanent role for 1 year, so that I was just doing consultancy within that time so that I could do my PhD research. So I invested that time in the field work for my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually planned what I was going to do for the next 5 years when I sat down and I said I would take a career break here and then I'll get back to work at this time. So I put all that into like a plan and started the process. So I took a career break to do the field work for my PhD, and then got back into like an advisory position where I wouldn't have to go to the office all of the time. I could work remotely, study in the evenings, and still participate in my children's life, while most of things around domestic chores and all that is done by someone else. So that when I'm engaging with my children, I'm engaging as a parent, I'm speaking to them because that was more important to me. I'm speaking to them, I'm teaching them, I'm talking to them about their values, I'm sharing moments with them, understanding what's happening in their life. Because if I spend a lot of time doing the domestic part, I might not have the energy to really participate in their life. So that was important to me. So I would schedule times in the day where I would do that. And then I would also schedule times in the day where I would spend time with my spouse, because it's important to me to have a strong marriage where my spouse and I keep growing together, keep growing in love. So love is important to me. I want to be crushing on my husband forever. So that's why I call him my lifetime crush. I don't just want to have a partner or someone I live in the house with or someone I co-parent with. I want to be having butterflies and have this overwhelming amount of love and admiration for my spouse all the time. So I'm going to invest in building that and keeping that, because it does take some work to do that. So we do have scheduled times in the day where we check in and spend time to be intimate in terms of knowing what's going on in our lives and our hearts, and that. I do that with my children. And then for my work, I have like the full time, like 8 hours in the day where I'm studying, I'm reading, I'm writing, and then trying to make sure that I'm giving my best at that, because that also, the achievement from that fits into the joy that I bring into the home and all of that. Yes.
And my coaching heart was kind of jumping happily when you mentioned that you actually sat and looked at like, what is my goal, what I want to achieve in the next 5 years, because I think this is so important and it helps us to prioritize what's important right now. As you said, with your PhD, this is not the priority now. And one thing that really helps me there, and what I often share with my clients, is this situation of maybe having new children, it's not forever. It's going to change. Like the first few months, few years will be crazy, but it doesn't mean that you will get no sleep forever, right? Like now, when my son is 4, I am finally sleeping after 4 years, right? So this is not forever, and it's something we have to temporarily adjust. So I'm really happy that you are mentioning it, and that's something that really works for you, to having the clear goal that help you to see this is important now, this can wait. And also I was super happy to hear about the scheduling, because I always say, if it's not on the calendar, it will not happen. And however weird it might sound to schedule time to speak to our husband or to go to a date with our husband, I mean, where is my calendar? I would show you. For those guys watching the video, it says date for tomorrow with my husband because we are having our breakfast date, and I schedule it because if I wouldn't schedule it, it wouldn't happen. There would be always some meeting or something else. So I am really happy that you are saying like schedule it and let's be conscious about what's important for us and let's find the time on it on the calendar and in our life. I'm going to change the topic a bit here. Because
Yes.
you, Blessing, as me and the men and women who are listening, you also have feet in different countries. You mentioned you are from Nigeria, that's where you grew up, but right now you have been living in the UK for over a year, I believe, with your husband and your twins. And I believe living abroad, living in different on different continent, it's not an easy thing and not everybody can do it, right? Like all of us who are here, like we had the gut to do it, but we all know it's great, it's amazing, but it comes with really hard stuff. So how this aspect of having feet in different countries, living in different country on a different continent comes to this mixture of everything you do, finding time for everything. Feel free to mention anything, the good things, the bad things.
Okay, so Susanna, if you must know, you're my sister-in-law because any anyone married to someone from Africa is my sister-in-law. So I love it when I see people who take the jump and the leap to marry someone from another continent. It's love on a different dimension because you're taking on the culture and everything. It's an entire lifestyle change. Yeah, so moving to, by the way, it wasn't an easy decision. My family and I had to think through it for years. So we talked about it and then we thought through it. When we decided to make the move, it was my husband's decision completely. And then he wanted to make the move. He got an opportunity to, and he moved here first. And before I moved, I had a lot of things that I wanted because it was different for us. I remember the first time I came to England, I thought the houses were so tiny, because
That's another
so
reason why I might stay in Africa. Yes.
I thought the houses were so tiny. So I told him I wanted a house with a yard, with in my children had space to play. They had like a large living room. They had space. I wanted those kind of things. And so it did take us a while before I moved with the kids because I wanted that. I didn't get everything I wanted, but at least close to what I wanted. I got close to what I wanted. So the space was a thing for us. And also coming here, not having the kind of support that I would have wanted to come in with. Nannies are for a certain, not for everyone here. It's not as common as it would have been. So everyone dives in and does what they need to do. Um, just artisans to fix things in the house. It's not as easy as it is in my country, in Nigeria. Those were really tough. Shopping. So shopping was a bit easier. In Nigeria, I didn't used to shop. I had someone shop for me. I had like a list. I'll just send it and they'll bring everything to my house. It wasn't as easy as that here. It's still not as easy as that. I do have to plan and shop right here. So there are several things that weren't work that were a bit, it took some time to adjust. I like the schools. My kids love the schools. My kids love the schools. I love the relationship between the tutors and the parents. It's very participatory, very conversational. They're very interested in each of the children. They know them, they plan for them. I like that about the schools here. The weather is slightly different, of course. Of course. And sometimes I feel like I prefer the heat in my country. And then sometimes I feel like I like the cold. But I think this summer is my favorite weather here because it slightly reminds me of my country because I see the sun. I love the sun. But then the sun is not as overbearing as it would be. It's not so hot, the weather. the hair thing. I don't know if you know about it for us, but it's hard to find someone who could get the hair right. When I first moved here, I had to learn how to make hair for my kids. So I started making their hair, my my kids' hair myself, but it was pretty tough. Now I found someone who can do it. But yes, it's such a big deal. We have to plan and get someone in Nigeria. You could just make the decision in a moment. You don't need to book appointments or plan it, or it just was it was easier there. And what else? What else? Food.
So I think we need to hear about the food.
So the options are very well, there's the interesting part and then there's a non-interesting part. I love Nigerian food. And here we get it, but it's much more expensive over here. And but the good thing is I get to try food from all kinds of cultures. I live in a city where you also have Indian food, Asian food, all kinds of other options. Yeah, for food. But I do miss Nigerian food.
Yeah.
I do miss
I
Nigerian
remember,
food.
yeah, when I lived in Italy, at the time I didn't speak any Italian, and we lived near the street when most of the migrants or expats live from Africa. So I had this favorite Nigerian shop. I would go there very often. Usually I would go there also just to chat with the people in there, because those were the people who could speak English actually, as compared to the other Italian. And I just like all the stuff I was like buying, I had no idea how to cook it, and like they would explain. So I like Nigerian food as well. We have a Nigerian restaurant here where I live as well. So I can imagine that's quite different. And I am, to be, not to offend anybody, but I think the British cuisine is not the best one ever. As a vegetarian, especially, like I can't even enjoy the fish and chips. So, and maybe I have stayed in Africa for too long
Too long.
now to kind of be used to, as well as you mentioned, the house help, the size of the houses. And I think these are the two things when I sit on my veranda in the morning and I watch our big yard with our huge eucalyptus tree. I'm like, I can't imagine going back to Czech Republic and live in an apartment. I just can't. At the same way, I can't imagine washing plates every day. I admire the women who actually manage, because I, however
I wash
terrible
plates
it
every day now.
sounds, I
Now I
don't
wash
wash the
plates every day.
plates. Maybe once on Sunday, but usually not, because I prefer to do something else, to be with my son or to do work. And these are, I think, two big advantages I would miss as well. Um, Blessing, I know we could talk forever, but I still have few questions which I want to ask before we finish.
Yes.
Um, the one is because you do your part for the environment, and Nigeria is, I think, very specific for some like environmental conflicts. And this topic is also dear to me because I studied environmental studies, and now we are with my husband trying to become a bit more active when it comes to open air burning and the air pollution in the area where we live. But how to incorporate this concern for our planet, for our environment into our everyday life, and be able to do something, even if it may seem the smallest thing.
Yeah. So I have a personal story related to the environment, and that's why I'm very passionate about it. So I come from a long line of fishermen, and my great grandfather and my father's, and one of the things that disrupted that system of fishing was pollution. And it's almost impossible to find any river in the Niger Delta that has not been polluted. So it's such a problem for fishermen in the Niger Delta. And I was born in like in Delta states, like part of the rural, semi-rural areas. And in our home growing up, there were certain practices that we used to have in those houses that I felt were, growing now as a grown-up, I realized that those were green practices that if many of the households adopted, it would make a difference. So for instance, we didn't used to throw away, like we had like a place like where we used to set up the compost. We separated our bins, like we had a place for paper waste, for food waste and all of that. And the food waste would be converted into compost that the children would make and would take it and put around the fruit trees like fertilizers.
Mhm.
So I grew up doing things like that, and it seemed very normal. And many of the papers, the paper, when we separated our waste and the plastic waste, we would recycle them and reuse them for other things. So, but living in the city, that becomes a bit difficult because unless the city had a system for recycling, it might be difficult to do that, especially in a place like Nigeria where many of the waste are just all put together. You know, it's not separated. But I think that every household, like every household, can have like a culture in their home where they say that we do separate our waste and find a way to reuse, recycle, and promote environmental practices in as a household. We have practices where we measure, we plan for meals. You have meal plans and the quantity of meals we cook in a day to reduce waste. And you know, we find out from everyone exactly what they want to eat, and so that everyone dishes their food, takes what they want in a way that we're not wasting food. And because food waste is one of the things that contributes to um many of the landfill dumping and pollution that takes place. And just in the house, not using plastic, having systems where we are not using a lot of plastic waste. And then we have these bags that we go out to the market with, as against buying, you know, buying or picking up bags every time you go to the market. So those are like some practices that were natural to me growing up that I find is not normal for several people, or they don't even think about it.
Mm.
And so before even studying, before climate change, before environmental conservation and all of these things coming up, we had natural ways of protecting the environment. So I noticed how many of our practices affected the plants and animals in the region, respecting pollinators, you know, leaving places where birds could stay in within the buildings, you know, having the house, leaving places where bees and other insects could build, not knocking down certain things. So just having that system was very natural to me growing up. And so knowing that many people do not know about this thing gives me an opportunity to just share, you know, from that local knowledge that we already had. So studying it gives it another layer of understanding the practical and technical aspects of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to share. And I think that women could be good stewards of these things because women are influencers in their home, in their communities, and everywhere that they go. So many of the practical things that I have talked about were stewarded by the women in my life, like my aunties, my mom, and elder cousins. You know, they were the ones who drove this kind of activities in the home. So I've seen women lead this from the basic aspects of this. So men champion and promote it, but women are like the real influencers of this. And I really look forward to seeing women standing in front of this, leading this change and influencing the way the environment is nurtured going forward.
Yeah. I love the idea calling ourselves the influencers, right? Because usually it's oh, she's the TikTok, Instagram influencer, but considering ourselves like the household influencer. And it's so true. And however small this may seem, like what we teach our kids and what we do in our household, I my 4-year-old, I am pretty sure he wouldn't throw a piece of rubbish on the ground, even if it's something very common here. The same way, like now says, "Oh, why people are burning? They shouldn't be burning, right?" So like these small things we share with our children, and it always, even if, as I said, it sounds super super small, but it counts. I believe that like that it actually compounds and it counts. Um, so yeah, Blessing, if there was one thing you would want the listeners to do after listening to this episode, what would that be?
So I would tell them to own their, the stuff I said about owning your achievements. Take hold of your life, own your life, and plan it. Look at the things, the social constructs around the things that you believe, the things that you do, and the actions you take, and just take some time to reflect on why you do those things, and come up with the things that will truly make you happy. Just that will truly make you feel good. Document them and plan for them. And if you're in a space where you find that you're unhappy or you're struggling with something, come up with a plan that is yours on how to be happy. Come up with that plan. Know that it's not going to happen in 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, but you can have a plan that leads to your happiness, that creates a pathway to your happiness, where you can go from crying every day in the bathroom to being excited about the person you see in the mirror.
And you are a wonderful example of this blessing. Thank you so much for being here. It was my pleasure talking to you. And in the show notes, I will link your LinkedIn where you are very active so people can connect with you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I had lots of fun.
Thank you, Susanna. I always love talking to you from the moment that I met you and all the times that we spend engaging. I love talking to you. I enjoyed being here. And thank you. I'm glad we finally did this.